Thanks for today's session and the opportunity to have a walkthrough through my findings when I was working during all the time with different clouds and different background that I've had when it comes to how I've been working with Electrolux during the cloudification journey that we've been that has been going on for a while. So a quick background about myself before we continue is that I started working very early with Novell and Lotus Notes, for those of you that know and remember that time. Moved over to working with GDPR, agile transformation, outsourcing, and then business change. And then now I'm working as a global cloud and hosting director with a team of 60 plus people, now primarily working with bimodal, capability shift, and cloud transformation. And as you see at the bottom, you have the different companies, and as you can see, there's kind of the red thread is that there are major global organizations that I've been working with. So that was a quick background about who I am. About Electrolux, I'll leave that to you to do the Googling, but these are some figures that you could use just to set the scene. Somewhere around 50,000 people. As you see, we have a huge market reach. Basically, just want to show that it is a truly global organization. And Electrolux has been around basically from beginning of 1900, and that also shows that there is a major history. So a quick kind of overview about how the organization looks like. And the reason why I say that is that when we come to the do's and don'ts, this actually matters. So as you can see, we are split into different regions or business areas, which is the same as geographic areas. So North America, Europe, and APAC, LATAM. And to that, we have the different group functions, which is consumer experience and the group operation. And then we also have the supporting functions at the bottom where you could see IT, HR. And this is important to illustrate because that also is because all of these business areas are very much autonomous, which basically means that they're accountable for their P&Ls, and they are also how we have shaped the IT and its maturity. That's why it is important to understand this. But I'll get into this a bit later. So a quick about my organization as well, because that also is important for the sake of this session, is that I have a team of 70 people, 60 plus people, as I mentioned, and it's very traditional. So you have the operating system environment and the databases, and then you have the operation center, the AD, and then the DevOps tools. And then I sit in the group IT, which is the global organization. But then we have the regional ITs, exactly as I showed in the previous page, where the IT is being managed. But then our work is a lot about collaboration, understanding what is needed in the different regions, helping them with that, but they are delivering their services themselves. However, my organization is also delivering global services. So there's basically services that is not owned by the different regions themselves. So as an example, we have consolidated and are consolidating more and more of our SAP environment into my delivery center, which is illustrated here. Just to also set the scene, because this is also important when it comes to kind of what I'm doing when it comes to the cloudification. So if we look at the journey that has been undertaken, the reason why we're here is that we could divide it into the pre-2019 when I actually started Electrolux, and then the future. So I'm just going to give you kind of a quick background what has been happening, so that you also realize the most important part of this is that to understand that cloud is nothing new. Using cloud, digitalization has penetrated the Electrolux business for a while. And it's not a new phenomenon. So the question that I'm facing is not if cloud should be something we use. It's not that. It's more about how to use cloud. So just to give you that kind of overview is that before 2019, there was a lot, is still a lot about time to market. So, and as I showed you also the federation that we have, basically the different business areas are able to manage their own IT and their application portfolio. And that also means that the utilizing cloud has been a lot about exploring and learning. And of course, at some point, you learn more and more, and then you become more and more mature, so you're not learning anymore. But the whole journey is still about learning. And that's what has happened. Now, during the last years, we've realized that there are some items that we need to concentrate a bit more on. So compliance, and this is not just compliance with external regulations, but also with our internal policies and procedures. So that's something that we see that more and more that we have to have some control of. And then also the strategy and the governance. So setting the strategy and creating a governance for how cloud should be continuous utilized in the best way. And also bringing the different cloud people together, which I call the community, to share knowledge. And that's also something that we saw that it's really, really important, and it's really well sought to have somewhere where we could share knowledge. And of course, there is no presentation that we could have without the word Corona, because Corona has changed a lot, and that actually has been one of the items that has basically shaped a bit of how we deliver our journey and our strategy. I'll get into this a bit later. So, and then for the future, once we understand all these different demand that we have, the fact that we need to balance the compliance and to the internal regulation and external regulations, as well as time to market, coming up with a governance, but at the same time being able to continue federate and have this type of federated approach to how cloud is utilized. So that's what I call finding and establishing a new balance. That's something we need to work on more and more. And also, as the usage of cloud becomes more and more in the different applications, then of course skills is important. The upskilling, reskilling, all of that is a major activity that we need to undertake in order to continue utilizing this well, not anymore new, but still new technology. And as I said, transform. And transform is not just about skills and people, it's also about legacy applications. At some point there is a life cycle activity that needs to happen, so we need to make sure that we have all the things set so that we could actually do that transformation. Also, something that is very important to have in mind is that we have, as I mentioned, Electrolux has been around since 1900s, the beginning of 1900s. So there is a huge legacy there, and the legacy has been kind of, you could manifest the legacy into different old processes and processes that have been established with the old way of working, which is the so-called the on-prem. Now that we have cloud, then we also need to challenge some of those policies and say, okay, are they helping our cloud journey, or should they be changed, or is it that we need to adopt to those policies? So that's also something that is important to have in mind, and that's again finding that balance. So basically what we did was that we said that, okay, we need to have some roadmap, and this is not something rocket science, and whichever framework you use, you also always see these same things. You see somewhere you need to do the strategy. You need to assess where you want to be, and then start designing, and then migrating, and then running. And it's a kind of a continuous journey. But I think what's important here is to understand that there's a lot that has to happen at the same time, and that's the challenge here. So how do you do that? And when I started here, I said, okay, I need to be everywhere. So what have we done basically? So took this framework and said, okay, strategize. So we need to create that strategy. So basically a strategy document for cloud, and it is a never-ending journey, because if we're going to be very detailed in that cloud strategy, of course, then there's so much changes that needs to happen. At the same time, if it's too high level, then it doesn't say that much. So we need to find that balance. So a lot of work that was done with different reference groups, but also with our ITLT, the leadership team, in order to agree what is the kind of a good level that we should have. So one thing I wanted to show here is basically our strategy at a glance. So basically, we said that we need to agree, all of us, at what are the drivers to cloudify, and you have that setup list there. And then we said, okay, how should we do this cloudification? And that's where we divided that into different building blocks. And again, each of those building blocks could require its own day to talk about, but you get the kind of the point when you look at the different building blocks. And also, we said that we need to agree on principles. So what are the principles that we need to use when we design those building blocks? So I'll take a very easy example, multiple cloud model. Should we have this type of abstraction layer on top of different service providers? Or should we just say, no, we're going to go native and we're only going to choose one service provider as an example, or what? So those are important principles to use in order to, when we design those building blocks, because it has a huge implication of the strategy and the details of the strategy and the implementation of the strategy. Also, we need to have some ambition. So you see, the ambition is that 50% of all our lifecycle management projects should result to a cloud-based delivery by 24. And that's because we know that we're facing a huge lifecycle management activities. So that's what we did here. Another, as I mentioned, cloud community. So when we need to do this design and build, it's also important to understand what are the requirements for everybody in the business areas. And that's why we created the cloud community. And then based on that, we looked at the technical principles that we need to have, at least on a level where it's understandable, it's implementable, but we cannot solve everything at the same time. And that's the key part of the do's and don'ts. Don't think that you have to start and build everything before you actually deploy. You had a great insight where Volvo talked about their cloud center of excellence, which in my organization we call it cloud office, but it's exactly the same thing. So you have a lot of good insight from that presentation that was earlier today that you could get. And also, we start thinking, okay, now that we do that, we need to establish a cloud operation. How should that be? Should it be federated? Should it be centralized? Should we have a framework that says, if I have a DevOps team that I want to do my cloud operation, what am I supposed to do? What are the stuff that I get from the so-called cloud office versus what I'm supposed to do when it comes to operation or not? All of those stuff, that's something that we had to at least have a point of view. And again, we don't have all the solutions, but at least we have a level where we said that, okay, this is what we're going to provide. And then also, another point that I wanted to raise is, there's a whole discussion about CMDB and kind of mapping between application and infrastructure. It's important to have that. You also need to have some sort of performance data to understand what should I do cloudify as an example. Because if it's a critical application, should it be cloudified or not? If there's a whole kind of different dimensions that needs to be evaluated when there's a potential cloudification. And also financial model. Different companies have different financial models, capex, depreciation, project depreciation, all of that needs to be considered. Another one, as I mentioned, that establishing the run, because that's key. You could cloudify as much as you can, great system, but if you cannot guarantee a good operation, then it's going to fail. And something that's important to mention here is that because we have a very mature on-prem delivery, everything is compared to that. So of course, you would like the same kind of approach, the same kind of process maturity, the same type of reaction time for when something happens in cloud, when it comes to as it is perceived when something happens on-prem. So I'm going to show you kind of how we thought about when it comes to cloud delivery. So on the right-hand side, you see all the different teams, and that's finding the balance. So you have teams that have no operation and no architect or kind of capability, but then you have truly DevOps teams, and then you have third parties that are coming with their demand, etc. So what we said is that, okay, we establish a cloud office, as you see here in the middle, and then we have some cloud architects that are able to help out with the different teams when they have any questions, but also we need to make sure that we make the cloud operation more and more mature. We need to create those specific landing zones, etc. So they also need to work with the platform itself. And again, going back to the Volvo describing their cloud office or cloud center of excellence, that's really key for the success here. We also created a service model. Basically, the service model says what it is that we're going to deliver from central and what it is that we would continue do and what are the kind of the premises of the operation service that we deliver versus if a DevOps team says, I'm going to do my operation myself. So those are kind of these layered approaches important also from a cost perspective, so that you could distinguish between different layers and say, okay, if you want this, you're going to get this cost. Another part that we concentrate pretty much on was the whole concept of how should cloud be kind of put together. So we established a steering board, basically representatives from key functions where they have a vested interest in how cloud should be delivered and matured. So you have that, and then you have the different teams that you have all these different dots in there, and they come with their demand, their projects, and we also need to front them and tell them that, okay, this is a new security policy, this is a new data privacy policy as an example, or this is the new data classification, encryption, all of that. So there's a kind of a discussion point between people there. And as I've mentioned a couple of times, cloud community. The success of cloud maturity is depending on individuals that are working within cloud. You cannot, when it comes to cloud, it is really hard to dictate every single activity that needs to happen and design that. So you need to have a good dialogue with a community, call it an architecture community, call it a service management community, it doesn't matter, engineer community. You need to have that dialogue so that the community or the individuals also understand where when there is a question that they have where there is no answer, that they should not just go ahead and create an answer for themselves, because that might not fly well with the regulations and policies and procedures that are there. So it at the same time, it's really hard to expect that an individual engineer understands all the different policies, the corporate policies that you have. So that's why that dialogue is important. So you share what has failed, you share what lessons learned has been, all of that. Those are really, really important to create. So again, that's also something that it takes time, but really it's a huge investment that if you get it right. Again, a lot more that could be said about that cloud community, establishing the community, but I think you get the point. And here, I've tried to kind of summarize everything that we're doing, and this is where to find the balance, which I talked about, means here. Where do you find the balance between the DevOps team that has a very, very mature delivery versus an IT team which doesn't have any cloud experience, any cloud maturity? So how do you draw the line? Because again, from a cost perspective, from compliance perspective, from security perspective, you need to find that balance. So if an IT team has a very exotic, let's call it exotic, PaaS demand as an example, how should we work with that compared to a DevOps team that might use a lot of common PaaS services, and maybe they don't want to manage some of those IaaS services as an example? So where should that demarcation line between these teams versus the cloud office that is delivering cloud operation? Because again, cloud operation cannot be guaranteed to have a maturity when it comes to every single PaaS service. It's impossible for a set of finite number of people sitting in cloud operation to know exactly all the different PaaS services that's within the, say, Azure market. So that's why we need to find that balance. And I'm not saying we have found it. I'm just saying we are aware of it, which means that we need to work with each of these teams to understand what they want, and then guide them, or ourselves be guided, so that we could see what are the services that they want, and then either we mature or we ask them to take over themselves. Now, going to some of these do's and don'ts that I've found so far. So there are lots of different models out there. If you talk to any of these vendors, they have their own model. So some of them is in red, some of them is in blue, some of them are nice, some of them are just words. So you have all of it. But basically, at the end, what my experience has been is that you need to stick to a framework. If you create your own, then you need to stick to that. It's going to be more challenging to lifecycle manage that one. So create a model that maybe utilize an existing framework. If you go with a Gartner framework, if you go with a Microsoft framework, it doesn't matter. But if you use that existing framework, adapt that to your own environment and call it your model, which in this case we call it Electrolux Cloud Acceleration, then you have the components. Then it's easier for you to do that lifecycle management that you're doing, because the underlying framework is something that you could look at, you could talk to other organizations, and you could see that, okay, is it helping me? What type of which maturity level am I at, etc. But regardless of that, sticking to it is the most important part of it. So do whatever you want, but stick to one framework. Jumping between different vendors' framework will basically kill the appetite. So basically, there's no silver bullet. So it's all down to your own corporate culture. What is your own maturity? What is the core culture in the organization when it comes to how things are done? Because that's important. It's really hard for the cloud organization to drive everything themselves. So you need to utilize the existing processes and teams that you have, but at the same time, you're challenging it. So it's really about that, finding that push and pull balance. Another item that I think it's important to say is that you can't win if you don't play. So what does that mean? You need to get in there. You need to get your hands dirty. You need to say that, okay, let's start here, but have a vision. Because this is a never-ending journey. So you need to start doing somewhere. And you will get criticized. You will get pushbacks. You will get things like, oh, this is not working, etc. But if you have a framework that you really believe in, then stick. I think my experience has been sticking to it is really, really the key part of it. And choosing the battles wisely. I mean, do you really want to get in there and change the financial model if you're corporate, or should you actually start with the landing zones? So that's the thing. So choose the battles. If the financial model is there and it's not helping you, don't get in there, but have as a roadmap to gradually start changing that. And that's what that choose your battles mean. There are a lot of pictures of Tom, but target operating model, very important. You need to know where you're going. I mean, the famous saying is that if you don't know where you go, any road will get you there. And that's important. So you need to create that operating model. You need to create this target operating model. This is the target I want to go, and then start building that, and then start gradually getting the organization helping you to strive to that target. Support of leadership, key part of it. I mean, it won't work if you don't get the stakeholders, the leadership, operating model, all of that. I put it in this picture. That's really, really important to have. And again, as I showed you before, you have to be everywhere. some of you guys are living under very, very strict regulations and compliance. So you have that. You need to think about this. Some is less, but you need to understand that internal regulations are as important as well, security policies, etc. And as I say, have a vision about where you want to get your cloud and get your people together so that they could help you drive that. One of the key parts of it is data. I have a really, really good relationship with data science because that's where there's a lot of demand coming and they know what they want and they really help you with this. So I would say from a kind of a do's and don'ts, again, some of them you could get into this really, really more detailed, but I mean, in a nutshell, I would say this is it. And the biggest part of it is the people that you have around you. Those are the ones that help you achieve all of this. So a lot of kind of business relationship management and relationship management. That's a key part of it. And in my case, it has been good because I have both the on-prem delivery organization, which could help me drive these kind of cloud operation activities. They have the know-how and they have the engineers, etc. So that's really helped me. Again, my case. So with that, I just wanted to thank you everyone for attending this presentation. And if you have any questions, etc., I think you could find me on LinkedIn or anything else, and then I could help you with that. So thanks a lot.